Hello, in the video coming up, we'll be looking at DNS servers and what it means for you when you're using your Chromebook. So you may be aware or you may not be aware about what a DNS server is. Essentially, whenever you visit a website on the internet using a browser, you will need to use a DNS server each time you visit a website. So when you visit, say, facebook.com, you're typing in facebook.com, but facebook.com is what you type in, but that is linked to an IP address. You don't type in IP addresses to visit websites, you type in the actual website name, such as facebook.com. So the DNS server, what that does, it's like a huge directory and it links every single known domain name to what the IP address is for that. So it links you from the domain name you put in to the IP address so it can show you the actual website. Now, as standard, it's most likely you'll find that the DNS server that you're using on your Chromebook is the DNS server provided by your internet service provider. So for me at the moment, well, not at the moment, I've just moved over to Vodafone from Virgin. So that's now my DNS server is with Vodafone. Now that's absolutely fine if you trust your ISP provider. Perhaps when I say trust, I don't mean that they're doing anything untoward, but essentially you don't know how they manage their DNS server and whether it's actually your provider who manages your DNS server, which I'll show you in a minute when we go to the Chromebook, because I assumed it would be Vodafone who manages my DNS server, but I got something completely different. Now you do have the option to use other DNS servers, so third-party DNS servers, rather than a DNS server provided by your internet service provider. Also, personally speaking, I prefer to use a third-party DNS server. I do generally believe it's a slightly faster, we're only talking like milliseconds faster, but over time I generally do feel that I get a slightly better service when I use a third-party DNS server. Also, if I'm using a third-party DNS server, I know who I'm using and I can check their privacy policy and find out everything I need to know about them. Now, it's most likely most ISP providers, internet service providers, because it's completely legal to do, they can check the DNS records. But if you're using one of their DNS servers, they can check the records to see absolutely every single website that you visit, and it's perfectly legal for them to do. Some internet service providers say they don't do it, but I'm sure the majority do for not necessarily marketing purposes, just to work out what their customers are looking at. It's very unlikely they narrow it down to an individual, but they may want to see how many of their users use Facebook each day and how many times they use Facebook each day and what other types of websites they're visiting. And they may also have to provide this information to governments if they ask them for that. Again, you just don't know. So using a third-party provider, although they'll have privacy policies as well, and although they may have to give this information if a government asks for that information, and in that specific country that they have to by law, then there's no real way of getting around that. If you wanted to go down that route, you'd have to go more down to getting a VPN, a virtual private network. But this is nothing to do with virtual private networks. This is just simply changing your DNS server. So if you've got your DNS server set, first of all, we need to check to make sure it's set to secure, because if you don't have it set to secure, even if you visit HTTPS addresses, if it's not secure, the DNS server, when you go to visit, it will go to the DNS server which isn't secure, and then that could be prone to man-in-the-middle attacks, and then your data could be spied on. So that's something you really need to make sure is the case. So first of all, we'll check to make sure that you've got it set to secure, because it should be. I think all Chromebooks are standard to have it set to secure, but you may have turned it off without realizing, so it's best to check. So we'll look at that, and then I'll also show you the other options you have, such as choosing a third-party DNS server. Okay, so here we are on the Chromebook desktop. So if you just go down here and go to settings, and then go to settings there, and then go to security and privacy, and you'll see here, use secure DNS. Now the first thing you want to do is definitely to make sure that is set to secure. because if it's not set to secure, even if you're visiting a HTTPS address, if the DNS server is not set to secure, you're more prone to man-in-the-middle attacks, and that's where someone grabs your data before it gets to the server that it's supposed to be getting to. So it's really important to make sure that that is set to secure. Also, although you set it to secure, the issue with using, I'm not saying this is the case with your internet service provider, but do you know that it is secure with the DNS server that you use with your internet service provider? Because it's still down to them to make sure that it's secure as well. So obviously you want that selected, but with here, you'll see the default is with your current service provider. Secure DNS may not be available at all time. So what that's essentially saying is that they may just not use a secure DNS, your internet service provider, you don't know. So I'm going to show you something now. So this is just a website that I went to. So it's currently with your current service provider. So let's open this up, and I'll just put in this web address, hit return. And it's top 10, if you want a web address, it is top10vpn.com/tools/what-is-my-DNS-server, and then / and hit return, and you get to this here. Now, I'm with Vodafone, and they're quite a big internet service provider, mobile provider in the whole of Europe. So when you do press to check your DNS servers, I was expecting to see Vodafone. However, you'll see I've got this here, country GB, ASN, CW access. I don't know who that is. Now, it could be Vodafone, or they've possibly outsourced it to another company to do it, which is fine. I'm sure a company as large as Vodafone, and this is going to go with other internet service providers, which are large providers around the world as well. If they do use third parties, they've most likely got a very good relationship, and I'm sure they've got very tight controls to make sure they use your data securely. However, it does make you think, okay, so this isn't even Vodafone who they're using. So these people have access to all of the websites that I visit. So if you wanted to, if you trust your ISP, or it's not even down to trust, or if you're just happy, you can leave it as it is. But I would say that you may want to change it to a third party. And with a third party, you'd still have to trust the third party. You'd have to trust their privacy policy. But you'd also, with a third party, you're more likely, well, you are guaranteed a secure connection, because that's what they do. So with this, for example, you could instead go with custom. If you click the drop down on custom, you've got a few options. I use Google public DNS. Generally speaking, that's what I always use. Because I've just changed my broadband provider, so this is why I'm going through this now. But I used to be with Virgin, but I've gone over to Vodafone. So I always use Google. But there's Clean Browsing, I don't know who they are. There's OpenDNS, I've never looked into it. There's Cloudflare. Now Cloudflare are a massive US company as well, and they are huge. If you've never heard of them, they are big. But Cloudflare do suggest that they have the fastest DNS server, but that could be the case. But I would suggest that Google most likely has an extremely fast DNS server as well. And bearing in mind that Cloudflare and Google, some products they have are competing against each other, so you'd expect Cloudflare to say they are the fastest. But personally speaking, for me, I would prefer to know that I'm using a Google DNS server rather than my internet provider. Not that I've got an issue with Vodafone, but I'm not sure that server was, for example, what I just showed you. I don't know who that is. It didn't come up with Vodafone, so therefore it could be a third party, and I'm not really sure whether it's secure, although hopefully it is. I'm sure it is, but cannot be certain. So for me, I would prefer to use Google. So if you use Google, for example, just click on Google, and there see this provider's privacy policy. So if you wanted to, you could then go through all of the privacy policy to find out exactly how they use your information, so it's all clear for you. Now with your internet service provider, this is most likely there, but it's in the T's and C's somewhere where you've never read, and you just sign it off and that's all done. So I'm now with Google here, and as you can see, it's just done, and you can check that it's done by, if we now open up another internet browser, and I'll just go to that web address again, And then here, press to check your DNS servers, simply click, and you now see that it's Google. So, and it's in the US. So that's fine. Now, you could say that, oh, well, it's in the US and I'm in the UK, therefore it might be slower. Possibly, but unlikely. Google have got servers in the UK, they've got them all around the world, so I can't, you know, that isn't going to be an issue for me. The best thing to do is trial and error. If you're in the US or you're around the world, it really just to check. But for me personally, I can see Google's privacy policy as I just showed you, and I know it's all done over a secure DNS server, and I think it is faster. As I said, the speed isn't so different that you can instantly tell, but I generally do believe that the Google DNS server is faster. So that's what I use. So I hope this video helped. If it did, please like and subscribe to the channel for future videos, and thanks for watching.